all. Welcome. Thanks for joining today. And I'm sitting here in San Francisco. I'm actually here at Pier 17 in our View Lab. This is the fourth, maybe fifth time that I have come into the office since March 10th. But it's a beautiful morning. I'll just pivot my laptop around here and give you a view of the San Francisco Bay. And yeah, looks like it's going to be a nice day. We've gotten some rain recently, so that feels great after not having any since May, after all those crazy fires that we had that blanketed the region in a pretty thick coating of ash. Okay, so it's 8:03. Let's get into it. We'll have some people joining, I think, probably a little bit late, but we want to keep things on time, respect your day. So welcome everybody. My name is Laura Erickson. I'm head of innovation and sustainability here at Swissnex San Francisco. Swissnex San Francisco is part of a global network. We've got outposts in strategic locations around the world that are interesting for Switzerland in terms of education, research, and innovation. Swissnex is something like a platform for open innovation that connects people that are working in the knowledge economy and important industries in Switzerland and universities and startups to opportunities and insights out here in California, the Bay Area, and the Western United States. Swissnex is all about relationships. That's what we're here to talk about today under our topic of going negative to create positive futures. Carbon negativity, going carbon negative is something that we've been hearing a lot about this year. And that's music to my ears, and I think our presenters here today as well, because it seems that there's really a dawning of awareness around the importance of all of those warming gases that we're putting up into the atmosphere and that we've been doing since modern civilization. So now the task before us is to stop putting so much of that stuff up there and to actually start taking some of it down if we're going to be able to avert the worst case scenarios that the scientists, that people like Greta Thunberg are always telling us we should listen to. If we're to avert those worst case scenarios, we're going to have to start removing carbon from the atmosphere as well. This is a concept that is sometimes referred to as drawdown. I kind of like that shorthand to just think about drawing that down. But there's lots of terminology out there, and this is kind of like a growing new field. There are lots of approaches to doing that because we do live on a planetary living system. And so it's kind of maybe like a jigsaw puzzle if we thought about it like that, how we're going to achieve this. It's not going to be a silver bullet. There's going to be no Google for carbon removal, I don't think, although I think Google's going to help remove some of that carbon. And companies like Microsoft are actively putting this into their sustainability strategies. I just point them out because I think it's like a really interesting way of thinking about sustainability. Microsoft has said that by 2030, they will be carbon negative, and that by 2050, they will remove all of the historical emissions from the production and use of their products. So that's sort of how we all have to think, is in that life cycle kind of manner. So we brought together some speakers today that can help tell a story and kind of humanize this very complex innovation and science that is behind going carbon negative. So today we're going to kind of like investigate this from the land aspect, and we're going to look at food, agriculture, and forest innovations. And we're also going to talk about how those come together, what's happening in this burgeoning industry, and what the people that are at the forefront of it that we have here today, their stories and what brought them to this, to devote such efforts to such a complex and hard challenge, actually. So that's my bit for the intro. I've also got my colleague Natalia with me here today. She's managing everything on the back end. Natalia, do you want to come on and say a few words for kind of meeting hygiene and how to keep us together on this program?
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. So my name is Natalia. I'm also working at Swissnex. I have a beautiful background which we were just making fun with the speakers. I just have a few little things. I'm going to keep you all muted. I know you can unmute yourself, but when you're not talking or not interacting, let's keep you muted, and just in case something in the background is happening, so it's not disturbing our great presentation we're going to look at a little bit later. Also letting you know this presentation. So the presentation part, when we're all together, is being recorded. So we're going to have that, and we're going to put it afterwards also on our website. So if you have any problem with that, or if you don't want to be on camera while you have a question maybe later on, or while you interact with us, don't put your camera on, because it's going to be recorded. So if that's something, just be aware of that. When we're in the breakout rooms, there's no recording. So we're just talking about the general part when we're all together right here. Also to point out, we have a chat function in Zoom, as I'm sure most of you are aware of. So if you want to activate the chat function, so far you'll just see a thing between us when we were checking things out this morning, but you're very welcome to also ask a question there if you feel uncomfortable, like asking in person, or you want to point out something, or you have a remark or something. Our panelists might also put some information there, or a website they're referring to. So keep an eye on the chat if you want. And yes, so maybe when you have a question, I mean, in the breakout rooms, when we go to the breakout room later on, also maybe that will be nice to have your camera on so people can see, but of course we respect if you don't want that. Also letting you know, if some people feel like they just want to watch a presentation and are not joining to breakout rooms, please just let us know, so you're not assigned to any breakout rooms and then the other people are just all by themselves. So you're welcome to communicate with us anytime, or if you have any requests. That's all on my end. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Natalia. So again, our goal here is to be conversational and comfortable and intimate with each other today, and sort of feel like we're in the same space. So I introduced carbon negativity. Let me now introduce you to our co-host for today's event. Cesare Assad is CEO of Food System 6, which is a Bay Area-based accelerator. And Cesare is going to tell you a little bit more about that. Before I turn it over to her, I just want to make the remark that next week is an important holiday in the US. It's Thanksgiving. Typically, people come together with their families. It's an important holiday for doing that. That's probably going to be difficult this year due to the pandemic. But I'm sure you'll be connecting with your families. And one of the goals that we have today is to give you something to talk about besides the pandemic and the elections. So food is something that really connects us all. Cesare, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura and Natalia, as well as Swissnex, and you all for joining us, having this conversation. My name is Cesare Assad. I am the CEO of Food System 6. And it is an honor to just be here and represent a little bit about our work. Today, I'm actually joining from the Northwest Plateau. So I'm currently occupying Pend Oreille land, or Kalispell territory, which is also known as the snowy northeastern Washington state. So just introducing a little bit about our work. As Laura said, we are a Bay Area-based nonprofit accelerator, and we are working across the food system to build a more resilient system for everyone. We do this by providing long-term business support to entrepreneurs who are truly change leaders in their work and who are committed to building companies that address the 5 areas of impact that we focus on. These are justice and fairness, vibrant farms, sustainable ecosystems, healthy people, and circularity. So very much on topic for today. And because we prioritize holistic impact, we see that our current portfolio is performing incredibly well. This includes 44 global companies across all entity types, from co-ops, nonprofits to for-profits. And you can see, those companies later on. Check out our portfolio on our website. A little bit about their performance. Over 50% of our portfolio founders are women. 46% of our companies are either Black, Indigenous, persons of color founders, or were founded specifically to support BIPOC communities. Since 2016, our portfolios collectively raised over 40 million in blended capital. So this is, philanthropic to venture. And we currently boast an 85% survival rate. So, we see, while it's early, 5 years in, pretty significant success from taking a really holistic systems view focus. And as we work with these founders, we are really focused on learning directly about the barriers and needs that they have. We use this information to educate investors, other stakeholders on their behalf. This year alone, we worked with over 60 volunteers as mentors and advisors to our organization and to our founders. And this is where you all come in. So hopefully today you will enjoy learning from this panel of change agents. And again, thank you so much for being here. From what we see, there's so much emerging, and there are so many different ways to build businesses, to create value for communities. And at FS6, we really feel like you have to look at all the ways. So this is what we do. So today you'll hear from a few innovators working in very different ways to address problems that intersect across many points in the value chain and that are urgently needed to address our changing climate realities. So without further ado, the real stars of the show, it's my pleasure to introduce one of our first panelists, Gonzalo Fuenzalida with Andes Ag. Gonzalez and his team are recent participants in the FS6 Huhtamaki Circular Economy Program. Along with 8 other companies, they were selected from over 400 global applicants to receive equity-free grants and coaching through our program. Their work is truly world-changing as they're harnessing power of microbes to increase crop yield, nitrogen capture, and carbon sequestration. So Gonzalo, it is all yours.
Thank you, Cesare. Hi, everyone. I have a presentation. This presentation is more on the personal side. I think it's important given the context of this meeting. I am the CEO and co-founder of Andes. We are based here in the San Francisco Bay Area in a city called Emeryville. And a little about me and background, what drives me and the team at Andes. So I was born and grew up in Chile without a ton of resources. Since very kid, I always love nature and science, but when it came to schooling, I chose to go into business school because of the opportunities it could provide it for me and my family. And I did 8 years of successful investment banking career, and my first son was born at the time after 8 years working in banking. And suddenly, this list of things I wanted to accomplish in life just shift. I've always had a bucket list of priorities. But my first kid thing changed everything. I cramped up my old list and threw it away and wrote a new one. And this time, this new list was focused on what I was leaving behind for not only my kids, but future generations. So this is when I pivoted into a biotech industry. And this is actually my second biotech startup. And I learned a lot from working on finance. I developed a lot of skills which I use every day until today. But I am still inspired daily by the impact we can achieve by the tools and products we're now building at Andes. So today's reality, it's quite different to what I would like future generations to inherit. Current agricultural practices are, so to speak, we've reached unseen levels of productivity because of these tools that are available for farmers, but also these practices are also creating a debt that is accumulating. Chemicals such as synthetic nitrogen and pesticides are today the pillars, inputs of our modern agriculture. So today, besides food, poverty, contamination, and excessive greenhouse gases emissions are also outputs of our broken food system. So what if we could change this starting with a seed? And that's the concept of that inspires us at Andes. So at our company at Andes, we have developed the world's first stable integration between seeds and microbes. And microbes can benefit plants in several ways, such as protect them from pathogens, help them grow under suboptimal conditions, and even being more efficient. Nevertheless, microbial technologies is still expensive for farmers and not broadly available until now. With a proprietary seed treatment method, we are unlocking a new generation of what we call regenerative agriculture. Our seed treatment costs 25 times less than current standard. Our microbial seeds are stable for years rather than a few months. And our treatment process is compatible with all kinds of seeds and accessible for any kind of size of farm. So how our seeds work? When planted, our seeds become plants that grow in interaction with our bacteria. And we program our bacteria to perform very specific tasks. The first task is for these bacteria to be able to fix atmospheric nitrogen for the plant. And by doing so, the plants can have, of course, more yield. Nitrogen is a fertilizer, it's nutrient for the plant. The second task we program our bacteria is for them to sequester carbon. And we do this by converting root CO2 into a stable form that will endure in the soil for decades or even centuries. Our first generation of corn seeds are exceeding all previously seen performance driven by bacteria. And we are working very hard here in California towards increasing the extra yield and carbon sequestration of future product generations. And also we are working for this technology to be deployed also besides corn onto soybeans, wheat, rice, canola, and cotton. To put in perspective, the technology that we are building at Andes, it not only has the potential to sequester CO2 at a gigaton scale, but also at an unseen low cost. And this is key to unlock the adoption of carbon neutrality by companies worldwide. So why now? Well, time is ticking. For the first time in human history, we are facing a future where the needed productivity for agriculture actually exceeds what the current tools can achieve. And at the same time, and this is, of course, the main topic of why we're gathering here, it's CO2 levels in our atmosphere are reaching critical levels, giving birth to an unseen global crisis. So we need to act now. We sense and work under the pressure of the sense of urgency at Andes. But we are happy and confident that what we are building at Andes, these tools will effectively help humanity tackle this urgent and previously unseen challenge. So Cesare, back to studio.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. All right, well, we'll just keep moving on ahead, from programmable bacterias to introducing one of our next presenters, who's actually an entrepreneur in residence with us at FS6. Ethan Rubley is building his company Farming in a pre-competitive environment. And part of that is so that he can share his knowledge and deep robotics expertise with us, with others in our ecosystem. And all of this is really about contributing towards greater discovery for all. And on behalf of small farmers who desperately need access to right-sized technologies. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Ethan and Farming.
Ethan, you're muted, just FYI.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm Ethan. I'm going to just kick off my presentation here. Just a second. All right, so I'm going to present our work at Farming. We're developing appropriate automation for a sustainable food system. So about a year ago, I moved from an hour south of Silicon Valley to a farm in Watsonville with my family. Like Gonzalo's, my children really inspired me to basically shift my career to improve the future for them and their children. So I spent the last decade in the heart of Silicon Valley in Mountain View, if you're not familiar with the kind of local geography here, working on robotics and augmented reality and startups and raising venture capital. And so last year we moved down to Watsonville, which is in the heart of basically vegetable production for, in the United States. So there's a $10 billion industry in the 2 counties down here. My goal is really to learn as much as I can about the food system and agriculture. And in particular, I'm with Food System 6, we're looking at supporting local farms. And I really believe that local farms, small scale direct-to-consumer farms are, will play a crucial role in both the solution to climate change through things like carbon sequestration, and also our resilience to climate change, in that these farms need to be resilient to the climate crisis that will affect their yields and productivity. So as part of that, with my family, we're learning to farm on our little 11-acre ranchette here in Watsonville. I'm building a micro online farmers markets, hyper local. We've been running now for 9 months and supporting sales for 22 farms locally, direct to consumer, and using all of this as kind of a system level view for developing robots for small farmers. So it's a long story, not enough time to talk about here, but on the robotic side, we're looking at the tools that are available for implementing best practices on smallholder farms. And so, state-of-the-art $1 million tractor from John Deere that's completely proprietary with camera-guided precision application of Roundup that doesn't really apply to the small-scale farmer, and especially not to farmers, the majority of which are interested in sustainability. And so what they're left with is basically purchasing old tractors off of Craigslist and eBay, fixing them up and using them for mechanical cultivation because they just don't make this type of tractor anymore. Well, a few companies like Tillmore are, but also another common tool is the walk-behind tractor for this market segment. So small farms are really concerned with the cost of the equipment and use it daily to get their job done. Now these, either you're stuck with very expensive proprietary technology or smelly 2-stroke engine, 4-stroke engine, small gasoline powered tractor. So we're really looking to reimagine the tractor for the small farmer, and we're productizing what we're calling the micro tractor, which is an electric software-defined tractor that would be a general purpose tool for implementing productive systems on the small scale. So in the US and Europe, there's a trend, in Canada, there's a trend towards market gardening or market farming, where you're directly growing vegetables for your consumer. And this is a really inspiring model in that it's practical to make a good living selling direct to consumer, and it's a neat lifestyle choice. Young people are very interested in this, and including myself. But these books are basically a manual on how to use those walk-behind tractors to implement an effective small-scale agribusiness. So our long-term goal here is really to try to rewrite the book of market gardening in terms of modern, low-cost, open-source tractors that don't rely on petrol for fuel and allow you to implement precision ag at a very small scale. So we're actively productizing our first version of the micro tractor. And here's just a few fun demos of us testing it. A common operation on a small scale farm is how do you get the product out of the field? And so, typically in a field like this is heirloom patty pan squash that's being harvested for seed saving up in Oregon. You can't pull a tractor through the field to harvest it, so you're left with a hand-drawn cart. So this really helps carry hundreds of pounds of squash out of the field. We're looking at not only harvest operations, but doing lightweight soil work for things like cultivation or transplanting, bed preparation. This is essentially a software controlling electric motors, and we have my experiences in computer vision and robotics control. So we have cameras on this that allow us to know where the tractor is at all times, and we're leveraging that information for very simple semi-autonomous behavior that will allow us to build more advanced tools. But here we're using that camera signal that you saw in the last video to keep the tractor on course, and it's robust to me trying to shove it off course or slipping in mud, or and so this capability we plan to build on top of it to implement like precision cultivation of weeds, mechanical cultivation of weeds around cash crops, or planting in straight lines. So we're on our third hardware iteration in just 8 months, and here's the CAD for our third iteration. And then Matthew, who's on the call, actually shot this photo this morning of it actually built, which is really exciting. So thank you for allowing me to introduce, and please check out our website or feel free to reach out. We're working on getting our first farms in line for testing this in the field next year. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan. I love the videos. Always love seeing the progress come along. And just another point sort of about Ethan is it's really amazing to have this expertise in the team. We've been able to help some of our other companies who are building things either in open source or creating alternative ownership models, connect with top tier technologists and really get access to different folks that are helping them grow their businesses. So Ethan brings a lot more to our team than just his deep expertise in robotics. He really brings a ton of mentorship, and we'll talk more about the need to continue collaborating. But on that note, I'll introduce our next speaker, who is also a partner for us at FS6, coming from First Course Capital. In addition to offering our entrepreneurs and graduates a safe note, a more entrepreneurial friendly investment note, and offering pro bono mentorship and advising to our companies, we have general partner at First Course Capital, Peter Hirsch, joining us. First Course Capital provides early stage seed investments in food system companies, and Peter is here to tell us just a bit more. It's I think just the very top of the iceberg in terms of his thoughts and their approach to making food systems based investments.
Thanks, Cesare. Thank you also to Swissnex. Great to be on the webinar. First Course Capital, as Cesare mentioned, it's an early stage venture firm. We invest in entrepreneurs across the food system. We're doing the work primarily because our food system is killing people and killing the planet. Aside from that, it's all great. While I'm an engineer by training, part of what brings me to this work is based on an understanding of the limits of engineering and reductionism when trying to solve for biological and human systems. It turns out that most everyone working on food and agriculture is trained in reductionism. There's nothing wrong with these tools. They are fantastic and exactly what you want to use when you're putting up buildings, creating cars, trains, and planes, computers and software for finance, database, and other applications. The engineering method, or reductionism, works because it is built on the premise that the whole is exactly equal to the sum of the parts. Unfortunately, these tools are provably ineffective on biological and human systems. You're probably familiar with the expression, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Well, that is exactly the situation in biology and human systems. Reductionism, which requires the whole to be exactly equal to the sum of the parts, just doesn't work on systems where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. An example around this distinction is that unlike with cars and computers, living things are built from highly interconnected building blocks. The interconnections are feedback loops that allow the whole system to respond and try to balance out any changes that take place elsewhere. This is actually a really good thing because those feedback loops enable us to survive and thrive even when crazy stuff is happening to our bodies. I know, I tested this out very aggressively back in college, and it was pretty amazing what my body could deal with when I threw stuff at it. Probably not as resilient today for various reasons that's outside the scope of this particular webinar. But anyway, that's really the key thing. And these feedback loops are so important to how living things function. In fact, they often dominate the behavior, yet our engineering, scientific, and reductionist methodologies don't take these factors into account, almost like pretending they don't exist. These concepts are part of what informs how we think about our work at 1CC. We're always scouting for entrepreneurs building innovations, but importantly, we seek out innovations where entrepreneurs are using the right tools for the kind of challenge they're tackling. There's an article that describes this in further detail that Laura will provide a point or two for anyone on the webinar who has an interest. Taking a more systems view is an important approach if we're going to understand the challenges and develop transformative solutions. There's good news, though, because the world is a highly interconnected system. When we create positive change in one area, it can often lead to positive impact elsewhere, too. Many things we can do around regenerative agriculture, carbon sinking, and going negative can improve the environment as well as human health and other end goals, too. So that's just a quick intro and a little bit of insight into how we think about the work we do at 1CC. I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're having this morning, and I'll hand it back to Laura.
Great, thank you, Peter. I did go ahead and put that link in the chat, so if you want to check that out, you can grab it there. Thank you for introducing us to a little bit of the Food System 6 universe and also First Course Capital that you work with, Cesare, Gonzalo, Ethan, Peter. So now I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker. This is Diego Saez-Gil. He's coming from a company called Pachama. If I'm saying that right, you'll have to tell me. Diego actually forgot to check that with you. But Diego is the CEO and co-founder of Pachama. He's going to tell you a little bit about what kind of work they are doing with forests and with kind of verifying, the carbon capture and seeing how that connects with the financial markets as well. Diego also has a pretty diverse background, just like the other entrepreneurs that we've heard from. So Diego, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to tell you about Pachama. And yes, our company, and I will share indeed a presentation here. Do you guys see my screen correctly? Yes. So in Pachama, we are really harnessing technology to restore nature as a solution to climate change. There is this billion years technology called photosynthesis that allow us to recapture CO2 from the atmosphere. And we think that this is one of the most scalable solutions that we have to draw down carbon. Forests indeed can recapture about 2/3 of the extra CO2 in the atmosphere. We have about 1 billion hectares available for restoration in the world, where about 1 trillion trees can be planted, which can capture potentially 200 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere. And that is, in addition to the 3 billion hectares of existing standing forests that we continue to deforest at an alarming rate in places like the Amazon rainforest, Congo, Indonesia, and so forth. And of course, forests are the habitat for biodiversity that is so important for the health of the planet. Forests support the livelihood of indigenous communities all around the world, and they are part of the way in which the planet maintains the temperature under control. The water that that the Amazon helps channel, through the air also has, big implications for agriculture and so forth. So in parallel to that, we saw how all these companies are pledging to be carbon neutral, to achieve net zero, right? Microsoft, Shell, Delta, BP, and that's great news because that money can actually go to protect and restore forest. However, when you look at the carbon markets today, it's actually quite inefficient, confusing, and lacking of trust because it's still working the same way that it worked in the 90s when carbon markets were designed. So we started this company with this mission to unlock the full potential of nature-based carbon markets, harnessing the latest technologies for selection, validation, monitoring, and exchange of carbon credits coming from reforestation and forest conservation. More specifically, what we do is we use satellite images and artificial intelligence to verify the carbon sequestration of forest and bring transparency to the projects that are receiving carbon credits. And then through an open marketplace online, we help connect buyers and sellers so that capital can flow from these companies to those who are protecting and restoring forest. More specifically, we build machine learning models that help us look at the historical data, what happened since 1984 when we have satellite images and how carbon is changing on those forests. We also are able to determine with high degree of precision how much carbon is there today on a standing forest. And then we're able to detect changes on the canopy cover. So if a project is effectively planting trees or conversely deforesting, we can detect that in almost real time. These models, what's unique is that they combine data coming from different sources, LiDAR scans, collected by airplanes, satellite images of different kinds, and then we calibrate all that, with field plots, measurements that are taken by forest services around the world, and using deep learning, which is a machine learning technique, we can come out with this very accurate predictions of carbon on the field. And then we use that to identify and validate projects that are doing a great job at either stopping deforestation or starting reforestation projects. Here, 2 examples of projects in Uruguay and Panama that have, started reforestation, and you can really see, with your own eyes, the greening of those areas thanks to those efforts. And then, we connect those projects through a beautiful marketplace with buyers. And today we're working already with companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, and Shopify. The intention really is that we can help originate more forest projects, and that in the next 2 decades, which are the key decades for climate change, thousands of reforestation projects can emerge, and hopefully tens of thousands of companies commit to achieve net zero and channel money to reforestation. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diego, for sharing that story. I just put another link in the chat because I just think it's so helpful for understanding this space, which is quite complex, and there's a lot of opportunity in it, and there's a lot of different ways of sort of putting together that jigsaw puzzle of going carbon negative. And I think that Shopify's site does a great job actually with that. So I wanted to share that link with you because I found it very, very helpful myself, and we found that helpful at Swissnex here. And I was very excited to have Diego from Pachama join because you've been getting a lot of different interest from different investors and different companies and whatnot. And so we're going to move now into the panel portion of the event. So I'm going to ask Natalia to kind of spotlight, if we can, all of our speakers. And we're going to do a little bit of a panel discussion, and then the idea is that after that we'll do this sort of Q&A in breakout rooms. So feel free though, as you're listening, to put questions in the chat. I'm going to kind of monitor that, as well as my notes, as well as the questions I thought of before we met here today, and we'll play it like that. So please put your questions in the chat, and you're also going to have the chance to ask them directly after the panel. Okay, so first question, so it seems to me that in the year 2020, there's been really a lot of attention around carbon. What is driving that from your perspective? And that's addressed to the whole group. So whoever wants to take that, if a few of you do, go for it. Maybe I can ask the question to Diego, actually.
Sure.
And you can start us off.
Yeah, no, happy to jump. You know, frankly, I am surprised myself. Sometimes, you know, I started looking at this problem probably 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, really, when I started having conversations here in Silicon Valley around starting a company to remove carbon, you know, through reforestation, people were like, well, but who's going to pay for that? And how big is this market? And really, in the last 3 years, you know, I've seen an incredible growth of interest by corporations, by governments, and everyone. It feels that there was a tipping point of public awareness around the urgency of climate change. Maybe Donald Trump helped with that, you know, believe it or not, because, you know, when we see that our governments are not stepping up, then corporations, individuals, you know, really, take things in their own hands. So, and it also might be that many of these commitments were accumulating, you know, on closed doors for a long time in corporations, and then all of a sudden, everybody's starting making those pledges public. But yes, it's really quite exciting to see big interest in carbon removal, and I think it's just getting started, to be honest.
Great. So I think you had something you wanted to say on that too, Gonzalo.
Yeah, and to put this on perspective, we should do the differentiation between markets that are actually regulated. And the case for Europe, they have a lot of experience on doing that. So they cap the amount of emissions an industry or a company can do, and then the company has to compensate. But on the other side of the history is what are called the voluntary offsets, and I agree with Diego. I mean, this is something that is all this news we're seeing about big companies, and you name it, all the big Silicon Valley companies are committing to carbon neutrality, either 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. And I think personally it has to do with revenue. And that is not a bad thing. I mean, and because of consumers. I mean, we all as consumers are more aware of climate change. We are seeing those changes happening on our surrounding. You mentioned here in California with these fires, last 7 years of drought and an intensification of fires. I come from Chile. We have been seeing for the last 15 years in southern Chile how the centuries of mass of ice are just shrinking every day, and it's dramatic. But the climate change is there, so we are aware of that, and we as consumers probably will want to buy from companies that are also conscious about this big problem, and that's perfect. The revolution is coming. People, consumers are becoming aware, so they will be demanding this, and of course companies will be buying credits, carbon offsets. That's the way I see it.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Let me point out that we've also got Rajal Patel here on our panel. Rajal, maybe you could give us an idea, since you're working with partnerships with Food System 6. What are you hearing, you know, around this? How are people wanting to connect? Is it kind of like through that carbon negative kind of approach, or is it more that they're wanting to connect in other ways that are more important to them than the carbon negative aspect?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Laura. I think we're just seeing that there are a range of partnerships in the market, and that people are, as Peter mentioned, not just focusing on one aspect of a solution, but kind of looking at things from a multifaceted perspective, and just being more open to the types of solutions and the types of partnerships that they want to create to solve all of these challenges. Because as Cesare mentioned, through Food System 6, we also take a very holistic approach, because we know that while carbon neutrality is one element that society needs to focus on, we also have other things that are happening in the world. And if solutions can help with all of those elements, then, more the better. So that's kind of how we see it. And those are the types of partnerships that we like to create.
Great, thank you. And I'm curious, so Peter, how much of this is being driven, would you say, also, interest also by regulation, the impending regulation? I think there's a case to be made that, that maybe it's not as pro-social as maybe it might seem.
Well, I think, change comes sometimes in very boring ways. And one thing that I'm quite excited about is that auditors are going to start identifying risks to companies based on climate change. And as that shows up in the audit reports for these large companies, it's no longer something that they can sweep under the rug and ignore. And so I think that's an angle that's going to start having some real teeth to it. It looks like it's been hard to prevent that from happening. I think overall regulation, particularly in the United States, is bought and paid for. So I hope each of you have a lobbyist in DC that you're paying, $50,000 a month to get the legislation and the regulations you want. But if you don't, then right now you're in bad shape. But again, I think things like the demand for audited financials to really identify risks is going to end up having real impact over the next decade.
Just to add, Laura, sorry, to what Peter said, I think we've also seen like a set of new accountancy regulations. The Sustainability Accountancy Board have tried to incorporate more sustainable standards into the accounting framework, if anyone's interested in looking at that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so for some of you that might not have heard of that, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board is, I believe, San Francisco-based organization that is looking, last I knew, at 10 different industries through that materiality lens to find out what is material, for investors as they're making their decisions, to be able to, to eventually force them to put that into their 10K reports. Another great company and another piece of the giant jigsaw puzzle. So let's talk about how you deal with that in your own companies. So what does carbon negativity mean for you? And do you actually, do you track that? Do you track your own footprint somehow in your operations? Does that work into the offering that you're making to the market? Or is that an operational kind of thing that you look at? Maybe Ethan, we haven't heard from you yet. How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think, maybe I have a more just the footprint of training a neural network is pretty interesting. And so like just the previous project company we were working on, we had 10 servers in a closet that a small team of 4 or 5 engineers was using, and that was a 25 kilowatt load running all the time, and that's a lot of energy, and we were using it to train a neural network to help Fox News broadcasters augment their news coverage. So it's like, oh man, this is fucked up. So I think like from a machine learning perspective, you become quite aware of like to train these models, it has a big impact. So, but I think it's like a double-sided coin. These models, like the work that Diego's using, they have the capability, right, to it's a hidden. An engineer doesn't have to like model explicitly all of the interconnectedness of the system, right? We can feed it data and some good heuristics for loss functions, and it can come up with a model that is way more complex than a person could engineer. So I think the work with our tractor, I know Matthew's concerned about essentially using materials that are recyclable. We have issues in terms of lithium ion batteries packs for how recyclable are they, but we're a little early and small in our development practice to really understand the impacts. But I think just having an awareness of the trade-offs when you're engineering a product, and hopefully the benefit of our product will outweigh its actual cost. So
pointing out the difficulty of kind of keeping things in one domain. Everything is a relationship with something else, and there are trade-offs, of course, involved with everything. So we've got climate innovators on the panel today, and to the entrepreneurs. Well, I mean, you're all entrepreneurs in a way, but to Diego and Ethan and Gonzalo, this question. You've all had experience with different companies as well, and sorry for the background noise here. How is it different, working in this space versus some of those other things that you've done in the past, like in finance and whatnot? I imagine it to be more challenging, but maybe there are some opportunities that also, make that quite different. I'm imagining it to be very different anyway than like a kind of traditional, software kind of startup that we all sort of feel like we know how to kind of think about. How is it different being a kind of climate entrepreneur and change maker at a global scale?
Sure, I can go first. Actually, I would say that in certain aspects it's easier, and in particular, attracting great talent when you are a mission-driven company that has a truly, inspirational mission, has allowed us to attract engineers from Google, SpaceX, Facebook, Tesla, and that's something that in my previous startups were, it was a lot harder, right? So, and these engineers are actually accepting lower salaries that they were having at these other companies just because they want to work in a startup that can actually, have an impact on the most important challenge of humanity. And the same thing has happened with investors, to be honest. Investors, in Silicon Valley, they want to, of course, make money and invest in companies that will scale, but they also want to put money on causes that they care. And inspiring investors is also, a benefit of starting a climate company. I think that the challenges are, it's always challenging to start a company. And, everything is difficult, right? You have to, create something from nothing. It's so much work. But yeah, I think that overall, right, I feel that this time is easier in some senses.
What about you, Ethan or Gonzalo?
Yeah, I share what Diego said, and I'm from the so I kind of feel the challenge is on the same scale. I mean, it's difficult. I used to work on investment banking, selling, trading equities and bonds and whatever, both industries are driven by sentiment. They are very personal. You always at the end act by the guts, as you say. One of the things I found very personally very satisfying is that in the banking industry, the relationships are very straightforward when you talk with a customer or with a counterparty, and they don't like BS, and it's the same with our pretty straightforward, pretty direct. Tell the good and the bad, and so it has worked very good for me. All that experience I brought into the actual farm. Yep, and I also I feel so at a personal level. I'm of course very happy with what we are doing. I personally feel that we are building something that will impact everyone else in the future. That's not the case with investment banking. I mean, it's a totally different impact. So yeah.
Maybe it depends on how far you extend that system though, right? Because the investment banking does sort of impact us all, right? I mean, we're all connected through these systems sort of, you know, we create impacts. It's just what kind of impacts do we create? Yeah. Ethan, do you have just a quick word on that? And then we will, I'm going to give the panelists also a chance to ask each other a question, and then we'll move into the breakout rooms.
Yeah, we're in the inception phase, you know, in the first 9 months of a startup in the garage, and having started this basically right at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, we're developing a hardware product remotely. Matthew's in New Hampshire. I'm in Watsonville, California, and so access to farmers is challenging. They're normally busy people, and but now being socially distant is you know interesting. So, but I think I second the, you know, getting past Matthew started the computational agriculture project at Google X, right? And I was like, dude, I can give you ramen to work on this like every month, you know, a stipend, like, and he's like, I'm in, and that's incredible. And so, you know, interfacing with incredible talent, and then also we've been talking to other companies, and because we're mission driven and we're looking at our technology, we'd like to build a company that is not based on proprietary technology, because, you know, that's one of the differentiators for us with robotics in agriculture, and because we want to really democratize and enable small farmers rather than disrupt them. So going to companies with an open source mentality has opened the doors in terms of contract negotiations and the willingness to share information. Basically, we're developing this completely in the open, so it just, that makes it easy on certain levels. We haven't gotten into, you know, the fundraising yet. We're still finding our product market fit, and we really want our first sources of capital to be very aligned with our mission, so that we can, this is a 10-20 year project. It's not a flash, and it's not a 2-year time horizon, right? So anyways, it's you know, it's stressful to start a startup too. You know, families care about the time you spend.
Definitely, but I guess it's been nice to have a little bit more time with them during the pandemic, and that seems to have brought some opportunities as well. Perhaps even like a greater focus actually on the food systems, I would suspect, because all those supply chains really broke down, right? I know that's the case in Switzerland for sure, that there's a great focus on, you know, security of food supply, and I imagine that's the same in all countries as a result of the pandemic, which is great for you guys, and also for thinking about how the forests fit into those landscapes. Okay, so now I want to give, so we're running just a few minutes behind for the breakout rooms, but I want to give the panelists a chance to ask a question to each other if anybody has something that you would like to. The people in the Food System 6 universe sort of know each other, but we're just meeting for the first time today with Diego. So if you have a question or two, we'll take that before we move into the breakouts. I think usually the questions that the panelists ask each other are the most important, or the most interesting ones, because you're really in the work, and I'm just kind of, you know, external to it, trying to understand it. So maybe Diego, would you have a question for anybody from the kind of Food System 6 universe?
Sure. I mean, I wonder if you guys have looked into some form of, you know, carbon certification for you know, the agricultural side of things. I know that there's, for example, a company called Indigo Ag, but any of you guys have looked at carbon credits coming from regenerative agriculture?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So
Go
are you
ahead,
going to talk about it, Gonzalo?
No,
Well,
I'll
talk about it from a just like a big picture perspective, I think, I think certifications are tough. And I think, especially in the carbon capture space, with what we see, I mean, we're seeing at this point, we're tracking around 2,000 active innovations that are all focused on different parts of the food system. And, between some of the new like carbon capture tools coming online, there's really, this is one of the things that having, Ethan and Matthew support is that, it's still really developing. And, I think the idea of certifications could probably be a whole other webinar. But, I just don't think we have enough conclusive data. I don't think we have enough access to the data. And I don't think we have enough baseline information across all of the different, variables around what we need to understand to adequately sort of put, I think we have these opportunities for incremental progress. And how do I think you all are working on these like incremental progress, how we consistently build better data sets and a better understanding. But I still think we're just not there yet. And I feel like the certifications can be, they can sometimes be problematic. And I think we're in this space where it's a really healthy conversation for all of us to be having. How do certifications serve the different constituents, and how do we make sure that when we develop these standards, we have, real meaningful data that's being adjusted and that's really based on the baselines of the different ecosystems that we're trying to address.
Great, thank you for that. Cesare, maybe just to put you on the spot, do you have any question that you would want to ask of Diego, and then we'll go into the breakouts?
Well, I did, so I'm glad you actually put me on the spot. Diego, I was kind of curious about, I think in general, we've talked about this, I would say it's more of a transformation than a trend of people really deciding to put their efforts and their talents into organizations that matter, that are making a difference. And then additionally, getting access to farmers. I think we're starting to see some change happen where farmers like recognize entrepreneurs who are actually delivering solutions that support them. So, aside from capital, what are some of the biggest barriers for you right now? What are your next milestones, and just a little about what you need to address some of these next barriers you have?
Yeah, I think that, as I said in the presentation, for us, what's the ultimate vision is how can we help originate more reforestation and forest conservation projects? And because today, if you go to our website, you will see we have about 35 projects that already are reforesting and have gone through certification, which, speaking of which, is very bureaucratic. So our next milestone is how can we help originate new projects, and we want to start, of course, with one, and then learn a lot about this project origination efforts, building software for these farmers to just make it easier for them to navigate the whole certification, getting started type of process, and then scaling that part, right? So it is about reducing the cost. It is about convincing forest owners that they can make money actually by farming carbon as opposed to timber, and then it's about scaling that globally, right? So I guess those are some of the main challenges.
Thanks for that.
New projects.
Diego, and thanks you, Cesare, for being willing to be on the spot. Okay, so now we're going to have our Q&A session. So we're going to do this in breakout rooms. You've probably experienced those on Zoom before, but we're going to split into some smaller groups. All of this conversation hopefully has some questions on your mind. We encourage you to, have a little discussion, if you had some questions for any of the speakers about their companies or about the larger topics that we're talking about. That's what we want to encourage. One of the things that I think is really cool about actually the pandemic is that we have the chance to kind of, connect in this way with people. Normally, if you came to an event, you'd have to sort of like hover around, kind of wait your turn to ask the speaker a question, a little bit awkwardly and stuff. So I think this is a great way to connect, and you can also connect with the other participants that we have here today. today. So we're going to do this in a round for about 7 minutes. That seems to be about a good amount of time. And if Natalia has those set up on the back end, I think we can go into breakout rooms for about 7 minutes. Then we'll come back into the main room, and we'll just kind of, say, hey, yeah, what did you learn? And then if we have enough time, we'll do that again. Okay, so when this window pops up for the breakout rooms,
Hello, Matthew. Are you still with me here? Just in case you're still with me in the lobby, you have to click on the breakout room button that you got. Matthew, can you hear me? You're with me in the lobby. Matthew Bitterman. Hello, welcome back.
so we all made it back. All right, I hope you had a great conversation. We have just a couple of minutes left for our event. So if I have one person who wants to make a comment, we could share one insight from your conversations. Is there anybody who wants to do that? If you do, I would say unmute yourself and keep it to 1-2 minutes. Okay, well, maybe I'll just offer a thought because maybe if you're a little bit talked out. But we were just talking in my group. The thing that we ended with was the Wood Wide Web. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, heard that phrase, but this is basically what happens in forests. Underneath the ground, there are all of these mycelium that are helping, exchange nutrients. Somebody else could do a much better job of describing this, probably Diego, actually. But you know, forests are alive, right? They're like a community also, and they're exchanging not only nutrients, but also information. And I like to think about what we're doing here on this event today as something similar. You've all got a piece of the solution with you. It's going to take all of us to become carbon negative. And I hope that the event here today has given you some more information about different approaches to that and has inspired you to think globally about this sphere that we share. And how we can do, kind of a jigsaw puzzle, and that provides a lot of opportunity for us as well. It's not just a doom and gloom kind of thing. This is like a chance to remake our systems. And that's really the way that I look at it. So I'm quite excited, actually, even if, you know, when you look at the news, there's a chance for getting a little bit depressed. I'm excited by people like our speakers here today. So I really want to thank Cesare for co-hosting with me today. It's been fun to play with you. And thank you to Gonzalo and Ethan, Diego, and Peter for all of the thoughts that you shared. And with that, we will end the event on time. And Rajal, I forgot to mention you. Thank you for joining as well. And we'll be following up to share the link where you can watch this video and share it with people that you know, and a few other tidbits of information too. So with that, thanks a lot for joining. Really happy that you spent an hour and a half with us today. So cool that pretty much everybody stayed that whole time. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time.